The year 2026 kicks off with this breaking headline. Ukrainian drones destroy Russian Bucks and Tor air defense systems in 1 hour. That was January 1st. On New Year's Eve, drone operators from Ukraine's unmanned systems forces took out two key Russian surface-to-air missile systems, all within a single hour on the Huliapol and Orikhiv axes. The operation was carried out by the Asgard Battalion of the Nemesis 412th Regiment, and their targets, the Buk M3 and Tor M2 systems, we're talking critical, very costly pieces of Russia's layered air defense network. It's gone. And that strike, that one operation, is really the perfect place for us to start today's deep dive. But before we get into the strategy behind all this, just a quick word for you. Mainly subscribe to Defense Reports. It's your go-to source for timely, in-depth military and defense reports. I'm Alex. Join me with Arya for a sharp, no-nonsense breakdown of the latest in global defense news, military technology, and strategic developments. And today we're going way beyond just one headline. We are going to cover how Ukraine's military intelligence, the HUR, spent all of 2025 executing what you can only call operational and economic masterpieces.
Masterpiece is the right word. The sheer audacity of that strike and, the precision. It just immediately brings the HUR's evolving strategy into focus. Our sources for this deep dive detail an entire year of, relentless, unconventional warfare. All of it designed to create systemic failure inside the Russian military machine. So today we're looking at how they turn these tactical successes, like taking out billion-dollar air defense systems, into huge strategic gains.
You mean like crippling Russia's oil revenue?
Exactly. Crippling revenue, forcing internal chaos, and really setting the stage for everything we're about to see in 2026.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have the granular details. We know the unit was the Asgard Battalion, and we have the numbers. I mean, that one strike took an estimated $45 million off the board, and that's just for the Buk M3 system alone. But the mission here is bigger. We're going to explore how that New Year's Eve success connects to some really sophisticated counter-EW drone tech Ukraine is testing, and crucially, how Russia's grim doctrine of meat assaults is actually driving a massive crime wave back home.
It's a perfect study in asymmetrical warfare. It really shows how ingenuity and targeted intelligence can have an effect that goes way beyond what you'd expect from a conventional military budget. We're connecting the dots, from the view through a drone's camera right to the Kremlin's balance sheet.
So let's start with that December 31st strike. It's such a perfect example of this repeatable, systemic strategy that they honed all through 2025. Tell us about the targets. Why hit the Buk M3 and the Tor M2 together?
Well, the sources confirm it was the Asgard Battalion of the 412th Nemesis Regiment. And they weren't just hitting random targets. They were peeling back the layers of Russia's air defense. You see, the Buk M3 is their modern medium-range system. It's meant to protect large areas, critical infrastructure.
The big umbrella.
The big umbrella, exactly.
Like that.
And the Tor M2, that's its short-range bodyguard. It's for point defense of high-value assets.
Yeah.
So when you hit both, you degrade the wider coverage and the local protection.
It's a double blow to their whole system.
A double blow to their redundancy. And this wasn't some, lucky one-off hit.
Right. You're saying this became a sustained campaign.
It became routine. The HUR actually has special units dedicated to just this mission. One is called Primary, or Ghosts. And our sources show that Primary alone destroyed or disabled literally billions of dollars worth of Russian air defense assets in 2025.
Billions. So they're just hunting them. S-300s, S-400s.
Answer, Buk, Tor, all of them. And these strikes aren't just for the fireworks. They create these essential little gaps in coverage.
Gaps that Ukraine can then exploit.
Exactly. Two, as the sources say, penetrate to strategic depth with their own drones or missiles, for recon or to hit even bigger targets deeper behind the lines.
And that strategic depth, it doesn't just apply to military targets. It applies directly to Russia's economy. This is what's so interesting. The analysis suggests this decentralized drone campaign is acting almost like a lethal external sanctions regime.
It's a fantastic way to put it. And it's explicit. HUR special units were tasked to be a key part of this long-range strike campaign against Russia's core revenue. Lieutenant General Kirilo Budanov, the head of HUR, he noted that Russia's economy runs on three things: oil, gas, and gold.
So you hit the oil.
You hit the oil. And the results are, they speak for themselves. The coordinated strikes in our source material show Russia's total oil refining output fell by nearly 21% in 2025.
21%. I mean, we need to frame that in actual dollars. That's an enormous amount of money that suddenly can't be used to fund the war.
Huge sums. But look, hitting refineries is one thing. To really choke off the military, you have to hit the transport networks, too.
The pipelines.
The pipelines.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened. Russia's wider energy infrastructure started suffering from what the sources diplomatically call mysterious adverse geological phenomena.
Yeah, serious phenomena. I like that.
Right, so we saw these phenomena affect major supply lines. The Central Asia Center gas pipeline in the Volgograd region went down. Then the Koltsovoy petroleum pipeline near Moscow. All three lines hit back in October.
So we're talking about major infrastructure just failing, needing massive time-consuming repairs.
Yes, and the cumulative effect is clear. This created huge domestic fuel shortages, which the Russian population is feeling.
Yeah.
But for the war, the occupying army is now feeling it directly.
Which brings us to Crimea.
Which brings us to Crimea, the next critical theater of operations.
Yeah, if your whole goal is to crush Russian logistics and revenue, the next logical step is to disrupt the entire distribution chain feeding the southern front. And that brought the focus squarely onto Crimea in the fall of 2025. The mission was explicitly the degradation of the occupiers' logistics.
And it was incredibly effective. The data points from the sources are just striking. Between September 1st and October 29th, so just 2 months, there were over 20 precision strikes. They hit at least 20 to 25 military equipment units, maybe 7 bases, and 4 really key oil facilities.
And the cost?
The Institute for the Study of War estimates the total economic loss for Russia, that's repairs, lost assets, everything, at somewhere between $4 and $5 billion.
$4 to $5 billion in 2 months. In one region. That's an unbelievable figure, and it must have had immediate strategic fallout.
It did. A critical secondary effect was that it forced Russia to redeploy 40% of its air defense reserves from other fronts.
Pulling them from where?
From Zaporizhia, weakening those areas and making them more vulnerable. And on top of that, the logistical collapse in Crimea led to a 15 to 20% jump in gasoline prices inside Russia itself. It creates this feedback loop of internal strain.
So operational wins are directly causing economic and social pain back home. Can you give an example of one of those big fuel strikes?
Absolutely. The focus was definitely on fuel. The massive drone attack on the Feodosia oil terminal in October was a big one. That single strike wiped out 20% of the entire region's processing capacity.
Wow.
And then there was the attack on the Atan depot in Krvardskoye. Now, this depot is crucial. It supplies the largest network of Russian gas stations in occupied territory. The attack took out 5 huge reservoirs, and most importantly, it cut off supplies for Russia's 8th Army for a full week.
A whole week without reliable fuel, that grinds everything to a halt.
It has immediate consequences for mobility, for resupply, everything.
And all of this success, it all hinges on Ukraine's ability to adapt technologically. So let's talk about this drone arms race. Russia is scaling up its own unmanned capabilities fast, which means HUR has to neutralize not just the drones, but their operators.
Right, like the operators in the Rubicon Center. So it raises the big question. How does Ukraine stay ahead technologically when Russia's pouring money into jamming and countermeasures?
The electronic warfare, the EW problem.
Exactly. Russia's trying to jam the radio signals that control standard FPV drones. They're trying to blind them, disable them mid-flight.
So if radio signals are the weak point, what's the fix?
Well, the sources point to a really innovative workaround that just bypasses EW completely. It's the fiber optic drone, something like the German-developed HCX. And it's fascinating because it's actually an old principle, like the old TOW wire-guided missiles, but updated for today.
Wait, so the drone is literally trailing a physical cable?
A very thin, very light, very strong fiber optic cable, yes. It unwinds as it flies, giving it a secure link up to 20 kilometers long. And because the communication is light, not radio waves, it is completely immune to jamming.
They can't detect it, they can't block it.
Nothing. It's a huge technological leap that just sidesteps Russia's defenses. Really says a lot about Ukraine's ingenuity.
The ingenuity is incredible, but so is the, let's call it the supreme skill on the covert side. The psychological warfare is just as impressive. I'm thinking of that February 2025 mission, the one they called the ophthalmology operation.
That was chilling. That operation really shows you the depth of the intelligence war. It involved delivering pre-rigged FPV goggles to Russian units.
Disguised as what?
As free volunteer equipment. Just a helpful donation. But these goggles had a small explosive charge inside, designed to detonate the second they were turned on.
Right on the operator's head.
Right on the operator's head.
That's a level of cold calculation that's hard to even imagine. The sources actually compared it to some famous historical operations, didn't they?
They did. specifically to a famous Mossad mission that used booby-trapped pagers to target Hamas leadership. It shows that the HUR is operating at a level that uses targeted elimination and psychological terror to go after the enemy's most critical high-tech personnel.
So despite all these successes, bleeding Russia financially, logistically, technologically, the ground war is still a brutal slog. The situation is tense, especially in Donbas and Zaporizhia, which are still Russia's main goals for 2026.
That's the assessment. And Russian forces did make some confirmed advances in December. They seized Novy-Shakov, and they're keeping up heavy pressure near Hudiapol and Pokrovsk. But the way they're making these advances, the human cost, it tells a much bigger story.
And on the Ukrainian side, you have these specialist units, Artan, Krekin, Sherman-Bat, achieving these critical stabilization operations.
That's right. The joint operation with the 3rd Army Corps in the Lyman direction really stands out. They actually improved their positions and, according to the sources, destroyed an entire Russian regiment. It shows that quality planning and competence can still beat sheer mass.
Which brings us to that sheer mass, to the reality on the Russian side. The sources highlight this lower tier of Russian troops. Former convicts, mostly, who are treated as completely disposable.
Yes. This is the tactic known as Miasnoy Sturm, the meat assault. These soldiers are literally used as reconnaissance by death.
Reconnaissance by death, it's a horrific phrase.
It is. The doctrine is to use human bodies as expendable tools to draw fire, to identify Ukrainian positions. It's not professional warfare. It's just feeding men into a grinder.
And the cost of that strategy is having a profound impact back in Russia. Far from the front lines, the numbers are just not sustainable.
Not at all. In 2025 alone, Russian losses were estimated at 410,000 personnel. And that number is higher than their recruitment for the entire year.
So they're losing people faster than they can replace them.
Which is why they're planning that mandatory mobilization of active reservists for 2026. It's a really risky move politically.
And on top of that, you have over 150,000 former convicts who were recruited and are now returning to civilian society. What's the impact of that?
A clear, direct impact. Their return has fueled a dramatic surge in violent crime across Russia. The data for the first half of 2025 shows 333,251 cases of violent crime. That's a 10.4% increase over 2024. The cost of this war is hitting the home front hard.
So the clear takeaway from all these sources looking back at 2025 is really the triumph of ingenuity and specialized competence. The whole HUR mechanism seems to be functioning flawlessly, from running what is basically a lethal sanctions program to the instant elimination of high-value air defense on New Year's Eve. And the fact that you see leaders like Budanov himself on the ground with troops, even in high-risk kill zones, that has to be a massive morale boost.
It is. But the path ahead is still going to be complex and exhausting. As Lieutenant General Budanov himself assessed, the most crucial factor remains armed struggle and resilience. And that resilience has to come from everyone, not just the special units we've talked about. For victory to come, he says it must become the active responsibility of every single person. So that means continued support, continued technological innovation, and just relentless strategic pressure on the aggressor state.
You've been listening to Defense Report by Alex and Aurelia, where we analyze the latest in military strategy, global defense, and advanced weaponry. Subscribe to Defense Reports, your go-to source for timely, in-depth military and defense reports. We'll catch you next time.